And welcome to a new edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns, back together in our STL Sports Page studio. Of course, this podcast and all of our great content here on STLSportsPage.com, brought to you by our main title sponsor, the Drury Hotel. Still plenty of time to do a late fall vacation, get your reservations in at any of the great Drury hotels. So, Mike, Cardinals win 2 out of 3 as they come back home here against the Athletics. I can't call them Oakland. I can't call them Sacramento. I can't call them Las Vegas. They're just the Athletics. But anyway, 2 out of 3 and a couple of good signs in this series, I thought.
Yeah, a couple of good signs for sure. It's definitely exciting and rewarding when you see 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati and then 2 out of 3 here. That's the way you want to play, right? The downside is there's not a lot of people watching these games.
No, not very many. But they saw a couple good ball games, though, and I think everybody who was at the ballpark on Wednesday night had to be encouraged by the start from Matthew Liberatore. His best start in 2 months, got the win, struck out 7 and 5 1/3 innings, and scoreless innings. And I think that's the guy that you want to see and get excited about maybe and what he can do in 2026.
He looked much better, and if you heard him afterwards, he talked about how he saw a couple things on his slider and the way they were attacking it, so he just continued to throw that pitch, and it worked great for him. I'm still a little confused as to why Ollie took him out of the game. You know, I understand that Ollie likes to move and take guys out a little bit early, and I guess he's a little bit worried about Libby's arm, but at this point, if you want to try to stretch him out, it's not the worst thing in the world to let him try to throw because we're going to need him to do it next year.
Certainly. And I guess especially with the way that series started when the Athletics pounded Sonny Gray on Monday, you kind of were, oh, no, here we go again kind of thing for that series because the Athletics have got a pretty talented offensive lineup. But both Miles Michaelis on Tuesday night and then Liberatore on Wednesday night found a way to shut him down.
They did, and it was interesting because Sonny didn't have to face, arguably one of their best hitters in their lineup in the rookie of Nick Kurtz, but he comes back Tuesday and Wednesday and both, shut him down. I mean, he still had a couple hits and a home run, but they didn't beat you then.
21 games left for the Cardinals in the regular season, starting with 3 against the Giants this weekend at Busch Stadium. And I think, one of the guys who also played well on Wednesday night, Nolan Gorman, 3 for 3 with a home run. He might be one of the most important guys to watch over those final 21 games.
He's certainly played much better, right? He's talked about the fact that he's trying to only swing at pitches that he can do damage with and not chase those outside pitches. And if you strike out, looking at a good pitch, that's okay, but you're not chasing the outside stuff, right? So I think that's the biggest takeaway from him is cut down on the strikeouts, but continue the power numbers. And, looking at this lineup next year, you've got a lot of interesting questions of who's going to try to be where. And this next month is going to be very important for guys like Nolan Gorman and guys like Jordan Walker.
Yeah, if Gorman can finish strong here, and especially if he can draw some walks, cut down on the strikeouts, or even, strikeouts are always going to be a part of his game. But if he can hit enough home runs and draw enough walks and make enough of the contact that you can live with the strikeouts, I think what you've seen from him, especially the last couple of weeks, I know he started out rough with the throwing at third base as he made that transition when Arenado got hurt. But I think, the last couple of weeks, I think he made some really nice plays in that series against the Athletics. So I think if he can finish strong here, you would probably, as of now, go into 2026. So if you're penciling in a starting lineup, I think you pencil in Nolan Gorman as your starting third baseman.
Well, again, a lot of that dependent on can Chaim Bloom trade Nolan Arenado. And that's the biggest handicap to this entire thing. And the biggest challenge is going to be what happens with Nolan Arenado.
The Cardinals are supposed to get some news on Arenado on Friday. He is back in St. Louis, supposed to be back in St. Louis on Thursday, seeing the Cardinals team medical personnel so they can get some readings on how his shoulder's coming along. He's been working out down in Jupiter at the complex in Florida to try and strengthen that shoulder and getting some at-bats and some swings. And hopefully, if he gets medical clearance from the doctors on Thursday, he's going to participate in some of the pregame drills and work out at Busch Stadium on Friday, and then hopefully be out on a minor league rehab assignment for a few days. And they're really anticipating he will play again before the end of the regular season.
And I think they need him to play because, they want to make sure that he's healthy and they want to show teams that he can still play and he's healthy. The question to me becomes, how do you trade Nolan Arenado?
By eating a lot of the contract and by trading somebody that you maybe don't want to trade.
Or you trade somebody with him, right? And I think that's where we don't want to do it, but that's where the conversation turns to Brendan Donovan, Alec Burleson, somebody that has trade bait that people want. Can you get Arenado out of there with that?
Yeah. You mentioned it a second ago, of course, so we're going to turn to kind of the main topic of conversation about Cardinal fans this week, and that's what's going on with Jordan Walker. And I'll say this before we preface this conversation. I was very surprised by the public comments by Ollie Marmol and Brant Brown on a radio interview this week about what they saw as frustrations with what's going on with Jordan Walker. I didn't think that was a comment that needed to be aired publicly, and I'll say that openly. I just don't think that was a conversation that needed to take place in private with the Cardinals, with Jordan Walker. How is he going to respond? That to me is the biggest question.
I've never been a fan of how Ollie kind of publicly criticizes players, and we saw this exactly play out with Tyler O'Neill. Very similar situation, right? He made some comments about Tyler and the way it should be, and now Tyler is no longer on our team, and he's playing very well, right? So it's really interesting, though, to hear these comments about Jordan Walker, because all offseason, all we heard was how him and Wynn were down there working with Oquendo, and they were putting in the extra time, and they're dedicated and ready to get fired up. And he'd played well at the beginning of the season, got hurt, and had some challenges throughout the year. And now all of a sudden we're hearing, well, he's not doing enough to get it done.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think you can backtrack this to a couple years ago. I think, in the problems maybe that you can be traced to when the Cardinals promoted him to start the 2023 season directly from AA, no AAA experience, and after only about a month and maybe 5 weeks of playing right field. And he's all of a sudden your opening day right fielder at the age of 20. I think now, obviously, people realize that was a big mistake. He was rushed to the big leagues prematurely, and he's not the first guy that's happened to. I mean, that's the way the nature of the game is played anymore. You got a young prospect, he's good, you want to get him to the big leagues as quickly as you can. But I think that had they erred on a little more cautious and given him some more time, maybe we wouldn't be going through these problems. But he said, the phrase I use, and I don't know if it's not an original phrase, and I'm not the first one that created it, but it's paralysis by analysis. And that's what I think is going on. If I had to give my opinion about what's going on with Jordan Walker, I'm not in the meetings. I don't see all the batting practices he takes, so I don't know, how much time he's spending on video, how much time, I don't know any of that going on. But it just seems to me like he says so many different voices, and I haven't added them up, but how many different hitting coaches have the Cardinals gone through in the last 3 or 4 years when Walker's been here? And add into that the times that he's gone back down to the minor leagues and had a hitting coach down there trying to tell him what to do. So he's got so many voices inside his head trying to do this, do that. There's no wonder he's confused. I mean, and here, the two things I'll say this, because the first thing we heard about when he came up, and we all saw how hard he hit the ball. I mean, his exit velocity, when I'm not a big proponent of that stat either, but yeah, it has merit in one sense. He hit the ball really hard. And I think that, okay, maybe they were on the ground, but they were getting past the infielders because they were hit so hard. And they said, well, he's got to have a higher launch angle. He's got to be able to hit the ball in the air more, so he'll hit more home runs. Well, that made you change your swing. I mean, the fact is Jordan Walker had success as a high school player, teenage high school player, as a minor league player, because he played the game the way he had always played it. And to me, when they got all that different things going on and tried to tell him, do this, do that, do this, do that, oh, don't do that, do this, it just left a mess. And I don't know how you get out of it, but and I'll say this too, the whole thing about the launch angle, and I don't mean to take all the time away from what you want to say about it, but I'll say this too. He's 23 years old. He's not, over the hill by any means. He's not a washout. He's not, he's not somebody who's not, you're going to give up on for nothing here. Because I'll say this, one longtime baseball executive told me years and years ago, when you're trying to evaluate young players, the last skill, almost always, the last skill that comes in a player is power. So the fact that he's not, and he hit 16 home runs as a rookie in a very limited amount of playing time. So it's not that power is not part of his game, and it can be even more so later. Just let the kid play and give him a chance. So I'm really going to be curious to watch how he plays and what happens with him the rest of the season.
The two areas where I think they really went wrong with Jordan Walker, one is how they handled when they brought him up. Like you said, there was a time last year where they brought him up and said they're only going to platoon him against left-handed pitching. Well, any of his career numbers would tell you he's terrible against left-handed pitching. So why are we putting him in a situation that he can't play? So I think that's the first thing they did. And number two is Jeff Albert. And I think Jeff Albert screwed up a lot of people in this system because his philosophy was home runs. That's all he cared about. And so he was trying to change too many people's swings. And an example of that is Colton Wong. When Colton Wong left and got to Seattle and Milwaukee, somebody asked him one time, hey, you're hitting a lot better. And he said, I'm finally hitting the way that I know how to hit and the way that I'm used to hitting. And that's very telling to me when you hear people go away from the Cardinals and say, oh, I can finally do what I'm supposed to do. So I'm curious to see, is Brant Brown kind of still teaching that philosophy to certain guys of you only can hit home runs? Or, I wish that we would let some of these young guys just come up and kind of break into the game with the way that they're comfortable doing it, and then try to tweak them, then try to make the errors, right? Once they figure out how to, what's so wrong with Jordan Walker hitting doubles every time? Does he have to hit home runs? I mean, like, don't get me wrong. You look at the way that the Athletics play, and they hit a lot of home runs, and that's exciting.
And he is a very big, strong individual.
But I think that'll come.
That's what I just said. I mean, the power is the last thing to come.
If you're making contact, it's going to come, right?
Exactly.
I mean, look at Nolan Gorman, right? Once he's finally making contact, you're starting to see the ball jump out of the park, right? And so I think that's I wish they would let him hit the ball the way that he knows how to hit and swing the way that he knows how to hit.
Yeah, that's what I hope too. And I just don't know that that's going to happen.
The one piece that I've noticed is, and this is kind of frustrating when I watch Jordan Walker bat, he starts here and then he goes up and then back down. To me, that's too much movement. And so when he tries to swing, it's hard to come through. So like when you're starting here and you go up and then back down, it's an extra step. Now, if you watch,
there you go. You're trying to be another hitting coach. You got another voice you're putting
in. Trying to
in.
give him another voice. But I'm saying, watch Alec Burleson. Watch these two guys and the difference, right? Burleson starts up already and then comes through. And so when you watch these guys swing, less is more. You watch the veterans and they don't move as much in the box. You watch some of these rookies and they come in and they're bouncing around and they're moving a lot because there's a lot going on. And so I think there's just too many things in his head trying to tell him what to do and where to go. But one of the components to that I was going to say is that his swing becomes so much longer, and that's where he gets into trouble because he has a hard time getting to some of those pitches because his swing is so long.
It also looks a lot of times just watching it from the game at the ballpark or even on television, it seems like he's standing an awful far way away from the plate, which and we all know, just by watching him, the biggest problem he has is chasing those low and outside away pitches. And if he's can't even get to him, of course he's going to miss them. So the whole plate discipline is going to be an important thing for him to watch. Can he draw some walks? Can you learn to lay off those pitches? We saw it with Gorman with the high pitches and he's finally started to lay off of those pitches and only swing at pitches that he can actually hit. And that's what's going to happen with Walker.
And what you notice with Gorman is the way his hands come through the zone, he's able to get to some of those pitches a lot quicker. Gorman's not moving his bat as much at the plate anymore. That's what I've noticed. And so when he swings, the biggest thing that people always tell you is put your hands through the zone. The barrel will come with your hands, right? So if your hands are going through the strike zone as you move quickly through there, the barrel is going to come with it. So instead of thinking about throwing the barrel through the zone, throw your hands through the zone. But again, all of these things are going on in your head while somebody's throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball.
And you got about 1.2 seconds to decide if you're going to swing.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So that's what the
nice and easy skill to have.
Yeah. And that's why you do it 3 out of 10 times. You're a Hall of Famer.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
It's very easy for us to sit here and nitpick and say these things need to be different.
It's easy to hit from here.
Yeah.
But I think that the thing too about it, and we've actually been asking some daily questions on Facebook about, different situations with the Cardinals. And the one about Walker was a couple of days ago was, do you think he's still going to be on the Cardinals in 2026? And right now, I think that's a very open-ended question. I don't know that we know the answer to that.
If I'm watching this team and not just Jordan Walker, but I don't know that there's probably 20 guys on this team that I think are open to be traded this offseason. I realize that's a lot, but if right now, when you look at this team for 2026, the only player that's not here is Miles Mikolas. Everybody else is either arbitration eligible there's a couple free agents here and there in the bullpen and stuff, but for the most part, Mikolas is the key guy. Right?
I would also throw out this scenario too, and I don't know that this is going to happen, and you and I may have not to come to blows, but be mad at somebody if it does happen, is I wouldn't automatically rule out Miles Mikolas not being back if he has a decent September, and because we know they need starting pitching. If he would cut a deal where he's not going to take, make it an incentive-based contract, low salary, I don't think it's out of the question that he comes back. As much as I don't want to see it,
if it's under $6-7 million, okay, sure, but 17 million, I don't want him back for 17 million.
No, of course not.
But again, as you look at this rotation, there's probably 2 holes in it right now, for 2 more starters at least. Yeah. So where are they in their mind, do they think that Andre Palante is an everyday starter next year? Are they going to continue this experiment? I hope not, but
Make sure that should be one of our future questions here. Of course, the question for the day on the Facebook page, hopefully you follow STL Sports page on Facebook, is about the your greatest World Series memory parade. I don't think we have to worry about another one of those World Series parades as of right now, unless they go on a 21-game winning streak between now and the end of the season. But what's your greatest World Series parade memory? I think yours is probably 2011, right?
Well, 2006 was the first one that I got to see. So, I mean, that was obviously cool to see the first one, right? And then just what Game 6 of 2011 meant and what that series was just pretty remarkable too.
Speaking of World Series, so follow us on Facebook and try to answer those questions. We're getting a lot of good feedback on that, and we appreciate everybody's support. But speaking of the World Series, the 1985 team in town this weekend, they didn't win the World Series. Thank you, Don Deckinger. But it was probably the best team of the 80s era that I covered for the Globe Democrat was the 85 team, even though they didn't win. But the 40th anniversary of that club, they're in town this weekend, as well as the St. Louis Cardinals Hall of Fame induction ceremony on Saturday with the late Walt Jocketty, great Cardinal ambassador and broadcaster Al Rabowski, and former shortstop captain Edgar Renteria. This year's class, very deserving, all three. So congratulations to them, and they'll be enshrined in the ceremony on Saturday over at Ballpark Village.
Does anybody have as many World Series walk-off hits as Edgar Renteria?
Probably, without looking it up, I don't know.
It was always an interesting stat that stuck out in my head, because he had the one with the Marlins and the one with the Diamondbacks, both to win the World Series, not just win a game, win the World Series.
Yeah, it's I think a very, very probably underrated player when his career with the Cardinals was concerned, and probably another one of those guys that left as a free agent that shouldn't have left. You can add him to the list of a few other guys that didn't went on to somewhere else and didn't play the way that he played when he was in St. Louis. So congratulations to all three of them. The ballpark the Cardinals will be taking on the Giants, as we mentioned. And you were checking the schedules the other day. You actually, the fact that the Cardinals still have 6 games to play against the Giants gives you a little more hope maybe than some of the other people out there as far as the chasing down that third wild card spot.
Now, I realize if I was to look at this just statistically and at the percentages that Fangraphs has based on how we've played this year, Fangraphs has us at a 0.8% chance of making the postseason. But that's not completely out of the question when you look at the schedule, right? Now, granted, you're going to need to go win every series as you go here. But when you're chasing the Giants and you're a game and a half behind them right now, you play 6 against them. So you can really make up a lot of ground if you pick up 5 wins against them. Now, you have to do some work to make that happen, but you're also chasing the Reds and you still played the Reds a few times. Now, all of that is dependent on the fact that you still have to play 6 against the Brewers and 3 against the Cubs. So you got to find a way to win all of your games. But
and everybody in the group that you just mentioned is still chasing the Mets because they hold that third wild card spot right now, and you don't have any head-to-head games left against them.
And the interesting thing is how streaky the Mets are, right? There was a time where they were really tanking for a while, and then all of a sudden, now they're about 500. Every time I look up, I see Helsley giving up another home run.
I was just going to ask you.
I'm kind of glad that
he's given up more runs since he got traded to the Mets than he gave up with the Cardinals in 5 months.
Did you see what Helsley's ERA is over his last 10 starts?
It's like 11
10 games,
right?
16.
16.5
over his last 10 games. So I don't know what happened there, but if you want to look back and say, hey, we shouldn't have traded Helsley or we shouldn't have done whatever because last year he was really good, we were able to get a guy for him, and now he's got a 16 ERA. So maybe he's going to help us catch up by keeping the pitch for the Mets. So
maybe he's still technically trying to pitch for the Cardinals.
Maybe he's trying to help us, yeah.
Didn't want to go to New York at all. So I'll help the Cardinals.
But we don't have any games against the Mets. But starting tomorrow, do you know who goes there? Cincinnati.
Oh,
so
okay.
The teams that we want and the teams that we're playing, they're all playing each other. And we're
still going to be scoreboard watching in September is what you're saying.
So if we can continue to win 2 out of 3,
the Cardinals
have to get some work done, right? And you need Sonny to not get blown up again, and you need Michaelis to continue to look like he did on Tuesday.
The other thing that's going on that'll be exciting on this Saturday coming up here is Liam Doyle, who was the Cardinals' first-round pick in the draft this year, the 5th overall choice overall, left-hander out of Tennessee. He's going to make his professional debut pitching for Palm Beach. Probably only going to be a couple innings, and their season wraps up this weekend. But then there's still some both you got Double-A Springfield and you've got the Memphis team with some games to go. So I'm going to be curious to see if he pitches well in that game, what happens with him. I think they'd like to get him into a couple more games. Maybe he's actually a candidate to go to the Fall League as well. They haven't set the rosters yet, but if they're going to try to we talked about putting Jordan Walker on the fast track. If they would put Liam Doyle on the fast track, he might be here sooner rather than later too.
Well, do you try to let Doyle get some pitching in the postseason in Springfield?
Well, that's
because they're going to have some options here. So it gives them.
I wouldn't think it's ridiculous.
I don't want to say that it gives him pressure, but it allows him, to kind of see how you perform in this situation.
And everything people say about him is how competitive he is and how he's, fiery competitor on the mound and that kind of thing. Well, you're pitching as a Friday night starter in the SEC and having success. I really think that can equate fairly closely to a AA level of baseball, the way big time college baseball is played now. So I don't think it would be out of question for putting him into that assignment and see what happens.
And he'll probably get 2 or 3 starts out of here. Maybe
I think he only gets 1 in Palm Beach because their season's almost over.
Okay, I wasn't sure how many games,
but he could get another 1 or 2 in the regular season in Springfield before.
That's what I meant. Basically, he can get 2 or 3 starts before the postseason to give you an idea of what's there, what it looks like.
There's one other minor league note that I want to bring up here before we get out of the show is that this kind of ties into what you talked about a minute ago about number of players on this team that may or not be guaranteed a spot in 2026. We all expect J.J. Weatherholt to play in St. Louis in 2026. I think most people, if you sat there and said, where do you think he's going to play, would pick second base because that seems to be like the most natural position. Well, if you're going to play him at second base, don't you think he also ought to be getting a lot of more reps at second base this year in Memphis? He has played 3 games at second base for Memphis. He has played 9 games at third base. He has played 20 at shortstop, which is where he played primarily in AA Springfield before he was promoted. So that leads me to this hypothesis, which I'm not saying is going to happen, but I'm just throwing it onto the table for discussion. You talk about the number of players who may or may not be available or on this team next year, who you're going to have to trade. If you're going to have to trade somebody that you really don't want to trade to make an uncomfortable trade that somebody else would want and would give you something back that's better than what you have, maybe in the starting rotation, maybe in the outfield. What about Mason Wynn?
It's going to be an interesting thing here because I'm a big fan of Mason Wynn. I think he offers you a lot. He's potentially going to be your Gold Glove winner at shortstop this year in the National League. Correct. With how he's played. He definitely deserves it. So the interesting thing about it is normally they tell you that the best player on the team plays shortstop, right? Mm-hmm. That's usually the position they play growing up. If you're playing shortstop, I think that's an easy transition to third. Not necessarily, and it's not saying it's not an easy transition to second, because if you can play short, you can play second fine.
I will say this, JJ, when I did the story on him on STL Sports Page earlier, last month down in Memphis, we talked about the different positions. And he also said that second base, he had played more second base in his life than anywhere else. So he thought the position came fairly natural to him. So he did not feel like he needed to work as much at second base. And obviously, if you go into spring training next year and you pencil him in at second base, the majority of time in spring training is going to be spent playing second base. So you got to put that out on the table too.
Well, and I think the other interesting thing to me is the guy that I think it also has some really good trade bait and is going to be an interesting candidate is the guy who's actually been playing very strong as a big piece for this next month of the season in Nolan Gorman. Mm-hmm. Because if he's starting to show that he can figure it out, is that someone we want to get rid of? No, not necessarily, but you got to make room for some of these guys. So at some point here, you got too many guys and not enough room. Number one is we know Arenado can't be here to make any of this happen.
Well, and you also have too many guys who are similar players, left-handed hitting middle infielders, and you also have too many catchers. Jimmy Crooks is another guy that's going to be interesting to see in September how many opportunities he gets to play, and can they pencil him in to be a candidate to be the starting catcher in 2026? That's going to be interesting to watch too.
If you were to look at this team right now, who's your starting catcher in 2026?
Jimmy Crooks.
So what happens to Herrera, Pages, and Pozo?
I think Herrera's another guy that's got trade value, because he wants to catch. He's going to go to winter ball and catch. This whole left field experiment kind of died without anybody saying that it died. So, I mean, obviously he can hit, but I don't think you want to pigeonhole a 24-year-old, 25-year-old guy, whatever he is, into just being a designated hitter.
And I think the interesting thing is when we look at some of the pitching staff and the way some of these things haven't worked out, I think a lot of that has to do with the catching behind them, because so many guys were able to figure it out, and young guys were able to figure it out when Yachty was here because that was all he knew and all he did. Well, now you're having so many different catchers to learn from and work from, and everybody calls a different game. And I just think that has caused some issues on the pitching staff too. So I think it's a long-winded way to say when we look at 26, there's not a guy that I wouldn't, consider a trade for, because, as from a fan standpoint, you look at it and say, oh no, don't trade this guy. Well, look at this team right now. Is this a team that can win the way that it is?
No.
So why are we afraid to trade some of these guys?
And that's what they have to come down to. They have to get that question answered. What do we have to do to this team to make it be a team that has a chance to win? Right now, if you looked at the players on this team right now, without making a lot of moves going forward, I don't think it's a team that can win in 2026.
And what's interesting is I say Mo has valued a lot of these players for a long time, such as Gorman, such as Walker, such as Wynn. What does Chaim Bloom think of these guys? Who does he want to be the guys to be in what spots, right? How does he see this team shaking out? And I'm not just saying that as a cop-out answer, but that's the biggest question mark in this entire transition is who does Chaim Bloom like?
We don't know. And there's going to be a lot on his plate. Boy, he's got a lot of decisions to make when he takes over for Mo. So it's going to be very fascinating, as we talked about on the previous editions of the podcast, to watch what this club does over the winter. So still 21 games to go. A lot of time to make some of the answers to some of these questions start to, play themselves out on the field. We'll see what happens. Cardinals with the Giants for 3 this weekend at Busch Stadium. Of course, the Hall of Fame ceremony, as well as the 85 reunion. We'll have it all covered for you here on STLSportsPage.com. Enjoy the great weather out there, and then still keep watching this team and get down to the ballpark, and you won't be disappointed. So for Mike Raines, Rob Raines, STLSportsPage.com. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, everybody.